with EWTN News Nightly. Join us tonight.
From the studios of EWTN, this is Open Line. With today's host, Father Mitch Pacwa. In North America, call toll-free 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. You can also text the letters EWTN to 55000 or send an email to openline@EWTN.com.
A tremendous Wednesday to each and every one of you. Thanks so much for tuning in to EWTN's Open Line. Father Mitch is in the house. Fasten your seatbelts. The number's 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're outside the United States and Canada, your number is 1-205-271-2985, and we will put you straight to the front of the line at 1-205-271-2985. You can always send us an email, openline@EWTN.com, or you can text your question to Father Mitch. Text the letters EWTN to 55000. Wait for a response. Text your first name and your question, message, and data rates may apply. I'm Jack Williams. Charles Beery, our celebrity producer today. Your call screener is Ryan Penny, and Jeff Burson handling our social media endeavors. What are you laughing at?
Nothing.
Have you made atonement yet today?
Well, I hate pop quizzes.
That's Father Mitch Pacwa stammering over himself over here. You're looking particularly unatoned right now.
Yeah, okay. Well, today is the Day of Atonement.
That's exactly
Yom
right.
Kippur.
Yeah.
And these are high holy days, for the most important holy days for Jewish folks. And as I said last week, I think it's very important to keep in mind. There was, as a matter of fact, already today at some synagogue, there was some sort of in Germany, there was an attack.
I think it was actually kind of headed off before they actually got in. Right.
But it's failed, thanks be to God. But this is something we have to watch out. That's not a German problem. This is a global problem right now. And a lot of attacks on synagogues have taken place in this country. And the more heavily Jewish an area, the more attacks there are. This is something we should very much pay attention to. If you hear people talking in such ways, try to correct them. If you think that they're dangerous in their talk, you need to say something to authorities. But this is unacceptable behavior, and we don't do that, and nor do we do it for any other group. That you may hear. We have enough trouble with people being intolerant, and we have to be very, very careful about that.
Do you have some emails there?
Yes. One is a question from Nate Hamilton. Have you studied or read the book of Enoch? Yes. I know it's not in the Catholic Bible. Is it even worth reading? Why were books like Enoch excluded in the Canon? Thanks. God bless. Nate, I found it tedious, quite frankly. My interests at this point would be connected to academic concerns and the way that it may have been used at different times, but I don't find it, of great value. And the reason it was not accepted into the canon by hardly anybody. I think maybe the Ethiopian Church, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, uses it. I think they do, but no one else. And the problem has been the authenticity of it, and that it was not used by Christians. It was not part of the lectionary cycle, and it didn't get carried on from the apostles as something that was scriptural. Here's another one. Did St. Paul write all of his letters? Yeah, he wrote all his letters. Let's see.
I think there may have been a comma there, not a period, Father Mitch.
Yes. Let's see. We have a new thing in our parish, a brief background to the first and second readings at all our masses on the weekend. This week we were told that the letter to Timothy was not written by Paul, it was written by someone 30 years after St. Paul died. This doesn't sound right. Please advise. Many thanks, Kathleen. First of all, this is, Jack, hold me back. I want to be charitable here. This is completely unacceptable. Whoever's making that comment is adding or proposing something that is an academic theory. I'm well aware of the theory. I had a course when I was in seminary on what's called the early Catholic Epistles. Basically, that was a designation given by a number of Protestant scholars on epistles that seemed too Catholic for them and not Protestant enough, like St. Paul.
James comes to mind.
Well, yeah, exactly. But they included 1 and 2, Timothy and Titus, because it's talking about bishops and that sort of, and the assumption was that it was written as late as 125. There was no agreement. Now, I would say this. This is a fact that the vocabulary, there's a high level of vocabulary in 1, 2 Timothy and Titus that appear nowhere else in St. Paul. That's true. And you can and should say that. But you also have to pay attention to, well, given that distinctive language, is there any other pattern you notice about it? And the answer is yes. That it is language that appears more commonly in Luke and Acts of the Apostles. And it's characteristic of Luke Acts. So, okay. Then you read carefully and you see that one of the people who is with St. Paul in the writing of those letters is St. Luke. And what seems the more logical than to say that it's written 30 years later or longer, 50 years after he dies. Some say 60 years later. All right, it gets a little farther and farther back. What makes more sense to me is that St. Luke was his secretary, or amanuensis. We know that he used different secretaries for different letters. One of them signs his name at the end of Romans. And sometimes St. Paul says, I'm signing it with my own signature, which you recognize. So he did not write out the letters. He dictated letters. And the amanuenses had a certain amount of freedom about how they express things. And so what makes more sense to me is that St. Paul dictated this to St. Luke. St. Luke used some of his own characteristic vocabulary, partly because he was a better stylist in Greek than St. Paul. He was a better Greek writer. So that is more sensible. But that I still date it to the early 60s before St. Paul died, and that it's Paul is the one who's the author, but Luke was the secretary.
Probably time for one quick one.
Yes. Dear Father Mitch, throughout history it seems that cultures have a need to make sacrifices to their deities, even those without knowledge of the biblical God. Is it possible that God allowed Jesus' manner of death so that humans could recognize it as a sacrifice? In other words, he let us do what we always seem to have a need of doing. And why does this need to offer sacrifice originate? Well, first of all, I think you're right. You know, that the human desire to offer sacrifice is universal, near universal. I see it all over the place. And this was a good thing. But, in terms of why do we make a sacrifice? If you've ever raised kids or been around kids, they'll have some of their favorite stuff, but to show that they like you, they'll offer you some. Now, sometimes you'd rather say no. They've been licking an ice cream cone and said, "Daddy, you want some?" You've seen that, haven't you, with yours?
Oh, yes.
But it's a sense of this is how we show gratitude. I give you what's mine to the one who gave it to me in the first place. And that's what you do with kids. That's what God accepts from us. That's what we call him Father.
EWTN's Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa.
Father Robert Spitzer.
First of all, you will get a much deeper awareness of your faith, much deeper awareness of the evidence for your faith, explanations of tough theological issues, how science and reason and faith come together, and above all, a deeper awareness of how to practice your faith and how to live it.
Father Spitzer's Universe with Father Robert Spitzer. Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Bishop Robert Barron.
Tolkien has reached out to, Nordic culture and literature and Icelandic sagas and all sorts of things. He learned a lot about the good, the true, and the beautiful from his study of pre-Christian cultures. He used narrative forms that were accessible to the culture. He adapted that to evangelical purposes. So that shows you that flexibility. It shows you a certain creativity in the evangelical art. He did not proselytize. Rather, he very delicately and indirectly and cleverly evangelized through the imagination, so that someone taking in these great stories of Tolkien or his friend C.S. Lewis, they're going to say, oh yeah, I get that. I recognize that pattern. So that finally when they hear the gospel, they'll say, yeah, I understand that. I learned that from The Lord of the Rings. I learned that pattern from the Narnia stories. And that was the genius of those fellows.
The people you know and trust are on EWTN.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network. If you have a question, call 1-833-288-EWTN. That's 1-833-288-3986. Outside North America, call 1-205-271-2985. Or send us an email to openline@EWTN.com.
Be sure tomorrow morning to check out Teresa Tomeo and Catholic Connection. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, right here on EWTN Radio. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. One line open at 833-288-3986. First up today is Patsy in Topton, North Carolina, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130. Patsy, you are on with Father Mitch.
Hi, Father Mitch. How are you?
Fine. Thank you, ma'am. What can we do for you?
Well, Father, I have a question. Well, actually many, but on the Amazon Synod that's now going through. I wanted to ask you, will this Synod bring us closer to be like a church like Episcopalians in that they want married clergy, female deaconess, and possibly changing our liturgy? And I just wanted to know, what do you know about this at this time?
I don't know a lot. None of them working there has ever consulted me about this stuff. Had they done that, I would have recommended that they hold such a synod in the Amazon basin. Cut off the air conditioner, no pasta for lunch. Let's try a little bit of piranha on a stick, which is something that you eat down there. A little bit of monkey stew. That's something edible. Maybe boa constrictor burgers. I don't know about that. But they'll eat anything down there. and get to know the situation more firsthand. Some of them have, some of them haven't. But that would have been my first suggestion. And I say that as someone who's been down in the Amazon. I was in the Peruvian section near Pucallpa, and it was really very good to see. And I fear that because there is so much input from the Europeans in a European context with European comforts, that they are trying to use this as an opportunity among some folks. I mean, it's not my interpretation. This was said by one of the bishops. Once we were done with this synod, everything in the church will be different. They want this to be modeled sometimes on the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Germany or the Episcopal Church. And the problem that I don't think they're paying enough attention to is that those churches are dying. And they need to pay attention to the fact that religious orders of women and men who pushed these agenda are dying. Seminaries that pushed such agendas were dying. They don't get people to come to, and they're doing what some people call the essence of madness, repeating the same mistakes and looking for a different result. These are not the ways of future growth, but of undoing churches. So that's my opinion.
Thank you, Patsy. We appreciate that phone call. That opens up a line for you at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Next up is Marianne in Des Moines, Iowa, listening on the TuneIn Radio app. Marianne, what's your question today for Father Mitch?
Oh, hi, Father Mitch. Marianne.
Hey.
Traveling to Chicago to see a great Catholic priest, Father Raymond Jasinski. Anyway, to visit. But and I live in Blount'sville, Alabama, near Mother's Shrine.
Aren't you something?
My question is, I have a best friend from first grade, and I'm 72. So 65 years we're best friends. She's an awesome practicing Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Her son, who's like late 40s, broke up with a girlfriend, and they were living with the girlfriend's family. Now they're back together. In the meantime, her son had moved into her little apartment downstairs in her house, and he wants to bring the girlfriend back in because they're back together to live with downstairs in the apartment and pay rent to her, which she is truly in dire need of the money. So what's the ethical implication? I mean...
Well, here's one of the things. Did she... When she was raising him back when he was not a mature adult, did she allow him to do stupid things under her nose?
Absolutely not.
Somehow I knew that. And why that now he's in his 40s and should be taking care of her if she needs it. Rather than living, I mean, I don't know all the situation, and my guess is that there's a lot more to this story than meets the eye, because here's one of the realities, that living together without benefit of marriage does not help your relationship. It harms it. There's a higher divorce rate among people who live together than those who do not. And there's even less divorce rate among those who remain chaste And there's some folks who don't live together, but they're messing around. And then there are other folks who maintain a chaste courtship as a really mature preparation for marriage and the commitment to each other. And I don't know what there is about the relationship that would get her to think that it's a good idea to encourage behavior that's going to sabotage this long-term relationship so that it won't be long-term. Is that what she wants, is to sabotage this? And the other thing is, he's in his 40s. I don't know how old this lady is. What is holding them back from a commitment? Why don't they get married? There's more to this, I'm telling you. And none of it sounds like decisions being made by sensible, mature people, but rather people who are hedging their bets and not allowing a mature relationship to develop. And I don't see why she would even want to be part of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Is she complicit then? Because she's a good Catholic woman. She's like cradle Catholic, practiced her whole life.
Here's was he already renting from her?
He wasn't renting, but he was doing all stuff in the house to help her, painting and fixing up her house. She wants to sell it.
Yeah.
She lives on a Social Security. Yeah, so he did help, but
he was living there before. He was helping her out, and now he and the girlfriend have primary responsibility. It's not like the mom is saying, "Oh yeah, go ahead, bring your girlfriend in." I think she needs to stand up to him and say, "This is wrong," and I don't want this in my house. And I think if she, stood up for that, and he said, "Well, I'm going to leave." Well, fine, maybe I can sell it faster. I'll need the money anyway. That might be a better way for her to go. It just doesn't. None of this sounds good, and so I would say to him, you marry the girl. That's going to be different. You play games like this, and you string this girl along. You want me to be part of that? I'm closer to meeting Jesus than you are. I got a lot of explaining to do before you. You better get ready to do your kind of explanation, but I've got to deal with mine. And, given that, she may have another 20 years max, maybe less. You never know. But I would encourage her to hold the line on that, especially if she doesn't want. And don't worry about the money. Sell the house, and you'll get a down payment on a nice place to live.
Next stop is Abilene, Texas. Suzanne's in Abilene, listening on the EWTN app. Suzanne, you're on with Father Mitch.
Hello, Father, and thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I have a question, but first of all, I want to say that I was in Midland, Texas yesterday, and the people out there at Guadalupe Radio are very excited about having you be the keynote speaker at the Fishers of Men banquet on October 26th.
This sounds like a commercial.
It is. Yeah.
Well, I'm really looking forward to being out there too. I like those folks over there, Guadalupe. They're terrific. So, what can we do for you?
Anyway, my question is that the other day someone said to me, because I was in the presence of my rowdy little grandsons, that I was trying to make behave, and somebody said, "Spare the rod and spoil the child," and then they said, I also heard it was spare the rod and hate the child in the original language. And I said, I've never heard that. Let me get back to you, and I know just who to ask. So, can you help me with that?
Yes, I can. I've got the Hebrew here, so you can hear it yourself. Chosek shifto sonei beno. Now, it's
there
nice.
You have it.
See? So you got it clear. But it's with the one who, think of it this way. the one who with this is a, because there's participles as a way to show. In English, you would translate the one who withholds the rod is the one who hates his child. It's not spare the rod and hate your son as if that's a commandment. If you do withhold the rod, that's a sign that you hate your kid. That's where that's from. Does that make more sense?
I appreciate it very much, and God bless you.
And then likewise, the second part of it is the one who loves him chastises him. Okay, so if you love your children, you're gonna discipline them. If you hate your kids, you won't.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. 833-288-3986. EWTN's Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa.
Dr. Greg Popcak.
We want listeners to see that God has a unique and unrepeatable plan for their lives and how to rejoice in the work God is doing in their hearts and in their homes.
The leading Catholic voices are on EWTN Radio.
And this is an EWTN Bookmark Brief. I'm Doug Keck. Just had the pleasure of speaking with Father Brian Mullady, OP, about his latest book, The Decalogue Decoded, What You Never Learned About the Ten Commandments, proudly published by EWTN Publishing. Always great to see you, Father.
Nice to see you, Doug.
And this is based on a series you did for EWTN back in the 90s, right?
Yes, many years ago, the early 90s. It was before the Catechism came out in English. And what I was trying to do was reinstitute an examination of the objective sins against the commandments, and mostly to encourage people, when they examine their conscience for confession, to be able to identify the specific areas where they need healing, growth.
A new book by Father Brian Mullady, available through our EWTN religious catalog. EWTNRC.com is the place you can get it right now. Look for the entire interview coming soon on the network. This has been an EWTN Bookmark Brief, and thank you so much for stopping by.
This is what St. Teresa of Calcutta, also known as Mother Teresa, once said about prayer. Love to pray. Feel often during the day the need for prayer and take trouble to pray. Prayer enlarges the heart until it is capable of containing God's gift of Himself. Ask and seek, and your heart will grow big enough to receive Him and keep Him as your own. That is why we need prayer.
I'm Gloria Purvis.
And I'm Deacon Harold. The Morning Glory team asks, what is your plan of life?
Tomorrow morning, 7 Eastern. Now back to Open Line Wednesday with Father Mitch Pacwa.
This is Open Line on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. 833-288-3986. Back to the phones we go. Tim is in Nampa, Idaho, listening on Salt and Light Radio. Tim, you are on with Father Mitch.
Hey, Father Mitch.
Yes,
My
sir.
question is about mindfulness. This new wave of being. I don't really know how to explain it, but my brother-in-law says, "Oh, you have to be open to the presence of God and mind." And he's not really a practicing Catholic, so. What's up with mindfulness?
I have no idea. This is not something that I have studied. I'm starting to hear about it. Now, I'm in favor, on general principle, of being self-aware, doing examination of conscience, knowing what you do right and wrong, and being attentive to the way the presence of God it deals with this. But I don't know that that's exactly what these folks mean. It often comes out of a more Buddhist kind of context. And,
yes.
Yeah. And Buddhism...
I saw a thing from one of the I think National Catholic Register. It said the bishops in Spain said mindfulness and Zen meditation are not Catholic. And
that's true. Yeah. Where are you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, Tim. One of the things to keep in mind, in Buddhism, the theological stance, the theological position, is agnosticism. And that may be one of the reasons why a lot of folks like this. In Buddhism, Buddha himself did not say there is a God, nor did he deny that there is a God. It doesn't say one way or the other. He's simply agnostic. It's more of a concern with emptying yourself of all desire, because desire is what brings suffering in the world. So you work to free yourself of all desire. And I suspect that agnostic side of this mindfulness may be part of the appeal, because again, this fits a lot of people who say, well, I'm very spiritual, but I just don't believe in religion. I don't like religion. And what that oftentimes means, not in Buddhist mentality, because they're very moral people, and they have moral principles, but for a lot of people, it means nobody can tell me what is right or wrong. I'll figure it out on my own, and I'll just be aware of myself and come to my own idea. That would be fairly common. Usually, that starts off by justifying their own bad behavior, saying it's okay. But even as you try that, eventually you find out that choosing bad behavior, even if you try to justify it to yourself, that bad behavior is self-centered, and such people eventually they feel the pain of doing what's wrong, and they may come back out of it. But, they could sort of shortcut by just accepting what God has made known to us is wrong, repenting of it, and just being mindful is, the stance of a lot of people who just have so little trust in any organization, including the church. And that's not helped by some church leaders who have shown themselves untrustworthy, but it'd be better to come back to a position where you can make a good act of trust and, to really find people. Take a look at a lot of the saints and learn from them. Sure, there's a lot of sinners. Sure, there's some Judas Iscariots in the church. He was a bishop too, so that hasn't changed. But you can find good, holy people that will give guidance. And I think that this mindfulness is a way that supports that distrust of all authority, and I'm my own authority, and I'll figure it out on my own, and I don't want you to do it for me.
And a good resource for you, Tim, might be A Catholic Guide to Mindfulness, which was written by Susan Brinkman, and you can find that at EWTN's religious catalog at EWTNRC.com. Again, A Catholic Guide to Mindfulness by Susan Brinkman at EWTNRC.com. Next up is Sean in Foxborough, Massachusetts, listening to EWTN on Sirius XM Channel 130, a first-time caller. Sean, you're on with Father Mitch.
How you doing, Father Mitch?
Fine, thank you, sir. What can we do for you this fine day?
Having a conversation with a Jehovah's Witness, I'm trying to be able to answer the question of why God's name was removed from the Bible. And going back to the original translations of, say, the Torah, is it that God's name was replaced with God, or is it just the, is it in the original text that way?
All right. For one thing, when you're taking a look at the Bible, your first question should not be, they've set you up for a dumb question, which namely, why was God's name taken out of the Bible, right?
Right, and that's not, I'm not saying was it removed.
But notice how you posed the question. You said, why was God's name? That's the Jehovah's Witnesses question, and you're already on their territory because they make two claims. One, that it was taken out of the Old Testament, and the divine name was taken out of the New Testament. And this is where you have to say, wait a minute, I need to understand these ancient texts. So that's one of the reasons that in my computer I have the Bible in a lot of different languages. I think I've got about 160 languages available to me on this computer program. I can't use all of them, but I can use a bunch of them. Now, in the Old Testament, they did not take out God's name, the Lord's name. And what Jews began to do in the 2nd century BC is a process of making sure they did not break the second commandment. What's the second commandment? Do you remember?
Thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain.
That's right. That's right. No, not or something. You got it. You got it right. That you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Now, to make sure they didn't take the Lord's name in vain, even by accident, they stopped pronouncing the name. Okay? And what they did instead is when they were reading the Bible, they would substitute the word Adonai. And as a result, how would they remember to say Adonai instead of the divine name? They would put, and they still do put when they write out the Bible with the vowels, they put the vowels of Adonai with the consonants of the divine name. And when they're reading this in the synagogue or in prayer, they'll say Adonai. When they are not praying, they won't even say Adonai. They'll say Hashem, which means the name. Because God's name is so holy, it is the name. Now, by the time, remember that's 2nd century BC, and it became a death sentence in Israel to pronounce the divine name. Were you aware of that, Sean?
No.
Yeah. That's how serious they were about making sure they didn't break that law, that it was a death sentence to pronounce the name. So they would say Adonai, and that is translated as Lord. So when people, out of respect for Jewish sensitivities, they would, Christian translators would put the word Lord with 4 capital letters to indicate the tetragrammaton, the 4-lettered name of the Lord. That's why, so it wasn't taken out, it just was never pronounced. And then in the New Testament, Jews still could not say the name, so they would put Lord, Kyrios, which is the Greek translation of Adonai. Does that help?
Yes.
What was that?
That's exactly what I was looking for.
And, I saw, and some people wonder, wait a minute, what about the pronunciation Jehovah? That is a false pronunciation. that is pronouncing the consonants of the divine name with using the vowels of Adonai. And that's false. That's not how it would have been pronounced at all. The only Israelite who was allowed to pronounce the divine name was the high priest on this feast of Yom Kippur. He was allowed to speak the divine name as he went into the Holy of Holies to offer the sacrifice of blood that he sprinkled on the Ark of the Covenant and offered incense. Then he could speak the name 6 times. But other than that, nobody else was allowed to do that. It's just a matter of respect. Whatever you do, Sean, and anybody else listening, never, ever allow a Jehovah's Witness visiting your house to use their mistranslation called the New World Translation. It is a mistranslation. One part of it, very interesting, they mistranslate the Gospel of John, chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. That's how they mistranslate. Do you know where they got that translation from, Sean? It was an ex-priest who had left the priesthood and gotten married back in the 19th century. And his wife was consulting spirits, and the spirits told her to mistranslate that text in that way. And the Jehovah's Witnesses are aware that in, I think it was in it was in the Watchtower magazine. They printed an article saying that this guy's wife got that translation from spirit channeling. They knew that, and they should know spirit channeling is a sin. It's called an abomination in Deuteronomy 18:9 through 11. And yet they included it anyway. That's just the beginning of their false translations. Their Bible is rife with it. If you are going to speak with them, tell them, I will only read from a Catholic Bible or from the King James translation. Your translation is a mistranslation and should never be used.
God bless you, Sean. We appreciate that phone call. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. 833-288-3986. You know, Father Mitch often recommends books to some of our callers regarding answers to their questions, and you can find a lot of those great resources, as well as a lot of those holy reminders that Mother Angelica often talked about at EWTN's Religious Catalog. Log on today to that brand spanking new website at EWTNRC.com. That's EWTNRC.com. Next up is Christy in El Paso, Texas, listening to EWTN on Ave Maria Radio. Christy, you are on with Father Mitch.
Oh, hi, Father Mitch. How are you?
Fine. What can we do for you?
The other night, you were talking to a lady. I don't remember if she was a recipient or administrator of acupuncture, and you were discussing the morality of it. And it seems that you came to the, or you were telling her that the conclusion should be intent. And I was just considering, I believe it was St. Bonaventure who captured the Christmas tree for Christianity.
No, it was St. Boniface.
Boniface. Okay, thank you. I just was wondering if we could apply those two ideas to yoga and capture yoga for Christianity.
Yeah, a couple things here. If you remember, one of the key things I had also said about acupuncture is that it's not just the intent. I also had said, the philosophical underpinning of yoga, of acupuncture, is unacceptable. It's a Taoist system. And the idea that there are equal forces, the yin and the yang, which is light, darkness, or good and evil, etc., that is not an acceptable Christian principle. And so you have to take the practices of acupuncture separate from its intellectual system, namely Taoism. And then you have to evaluate the effect of the practice on on health. And I recommend, especially if it's something to deal with health, take a look at some double-blind studies, see what can be shown, do test groups and so on, to make sure that this is acceptable. So that's the first step. And then the same thing applies to yoga. You have to first of all understand what is the underlying assumption with yoga. And that is, Christy, do you know?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
No, I think it's Hindi, isn't it?
Well, it's Hinduism, but what aspect of Hinduism is very, very diverse and complicated. But what part of this is from 8th century BC? It was kind of a reform of Hinduism. And what is the goal?
Is it transcendental meditation?
Well, no, that's one style of yoga. The goal of transcendental meditation and of other forms of yoga is for your personality to cease to exist, for you to become nothingness, at one with Brahma, which is not God. It is this ground of all being, and that you become one with nothingness and cease to exist. That's the goal of yoga. Now, does that sound like a Christian goal?
No.
No, not at all. And that would be very very contrary to our Christian faith. So we have to be very alert to that. And I studied yoga myself. As a matter of fact, you may, speaking of books, I don't know if it's in print anymore, but I wrote a book called Catholics in the New Age. And I did a chapter on yoga because I looked at that. I tried to do what was called Christian yoga. And I kept running into the same problem, not only in myself, but with others. But you find that you end up with this, seeking a state of consciousness. Whereas Christian meditation is about this union with Christ. It's not that your personality ceases to exist. That's not the goal of Christianity. The goal is to die to yourself, but not exterminate yourself. The goal is to have union with Jesus Christ, not self-disintegration. And I came to a point after trying this for a good amount of time to say, no, this is just incompatible. I'm not against stretching exercises and things. That's something you should check with a doctor about. But I think it's very important to know that you can't, have this attempt at self-dissolution. And I know studies on transcendental meditation, long-term, short-term studies indicated that people improved performance. These were short-term studies on people using it for a couple of months. But what they don't like to let you know about is long-term studies showed that there was clinical depression and that you did dissolve yourself. It really did lead people to be, lose a sense of their self. So it was effective for what it's trying to do. It's just that that's not a goal compatible with Christianity.
Thanks, Christy. We appreciate that call. 833-288-EWTN is our toll-free number. Next stop, Hastings, Nebraska. Scott is in Hastings, listening on Spirit Catholic Radio. Scott, what's your question today for Father Mitch?
Thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure.
My call has to do with Jewish culture, New Testament, messenger angel Gabriel talking to Joseph and Mary. Joseph was in a dream, and Gabriel came to him. Verse 21 says this, and thou, Joseph, shall call his name Jesus. Pretty straightforward.
Right.
I go down to verse 25, and it says, and he knew her not. And it says again, and he, Joseph, called his name Jesus. Very straightforward. Okay.
Right.
And then I go over here to Luke 1:31, and Mary says, and behold, thou, Mary, Joseph's not going to do this, thou shalt conceive in thy womb and bring forth a son, and shalt call his name Jesus. Notice what's missing here. The thing, thou shalt call his name Jesus. My question is, in the Jewish culture, was Joseph responsible? In other words, I'm a stranger. I come into the household and I say, you have a son. What is his name? Mary would say, my husband, Joseph, named him Jesus. Joseph named Jesus. And am I thinking correctly here? In other words, whatever was the authority there, they'd go to the head of the household. You have a son. What is his name? Head of household would say his name is Jesus. He makes the declaration of the name.
Yeah, there would the legal headship would definitely be the husband, and he had the legal position to make such decisions. Are you married, Scott?
Yes, sir.
And I'm sure that you know that there's a certain kind of headship to the family you bring, and you make a lot of decisions. But there's also the role of your wife, and and in this context, Gabriel gives her the name before the child is even conceived. That's what she's going to call the child, and then he repeats that months later, after she's known to be with child, and repeats the same message to Joseph in the dream. So it's consistency, but in terms of what folks on the outside would take as authoritative would be Joseph's decision to go along with that. But that decision had already been made before the angel had even spoken to Joseph. This was a name chosen by the Lord and revealed to both his father and mother, which itself is unusual. Samson is as close as you get, but a lot of times you don't see that both of them get the message. The angel repeated to Manoah the name Samson that he'd already given to Manoah's wife. So that's something more what's going on here. Does that help,
Scott?
Excellent.
All right.
Great, thanks for that. And very quickly, Father Mitch, Susan washes church linens, and she wants to know about precious bloodstains that remain after Mass.
Yeah, what you do is this. You put them in water and let them soak. And you can use something like, that stuff that gets the stain
Spray and wash or stain pre-treating type deal. Yeah.
And let it sit, and then put that water into the ground, and then wash them in a regular way.
Father, would you leave us with a blessing?
Lord, bless you all and keep you and cause his face to shine upon you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen. On behalf of our host, Father Mitch Pacwa, producer Charles Beery, our call screener Ryan Penny, and our social media maven, Mr. Jeff Burson, I'm Jack Williams. Thanks so much for tuning in. Back at it tomorrow with Father Larry Richards, talking the new evangel.